Hello again, welcome to the second hour of In Focus. Timbekile Mkhototo back in tonight for Thabo Mdluli. This leads this hour. Police Commissioner General Sitole says he received no prior warning of July's civil unrest in Gauteng and KZN. Over 300 people died during riots and looting in parts of the two provinces. Sitole made the comments while speaking on Tuesday at the South African Human Rights Commission hearings that were looking into the unrest.
So will I also be correct to say that from what you have explained, the intelligence report that you referred to was also received during the time of the unrest, not before?
The one that I'm referring to, yes.
In other words, there was no intelligence report in relation to the upcoming unrest that you received?
Yeah, a report that was explicit to say here's an unrest coming in terms of this modus operandi. Such a report was not picked up by all the intelligence because the actual modus operandi could not be advanced before.
It wasn't picked up by all intelligence. Is that what you're saying?
The modus operandi, yes.
Well, Sitole also contradicted the police minister Begicele's claims that he did not receive any intelligence reports since 2020.
The minister says since December 2020, he has not received any intelligence report briefing from SAFs on any matter. So he cannot be correct according to you.
To say on any matter, it won't be correct to say on any matter. But it depends what are the matters referred to.
May I also try and understand, according to you, you would only brief the minister in relation to policy matters, not operational matters?
I will brief him on operational matters which impact on policy.
If it doesn't reflect impact on policy, you don't. Is it your prerogative or is it your policy that says you shouldn't brief the minister on matters, operational matters that does not relate to policy?
The prescripts which relate to the functional mandate of the National Commissioner are clear to say the operational matters, they are dealt with up to which level and which matters involve or require the executive.
In that paragraph 11, Commissioner, it says it doesn't only refer to an intelligence report prior to the unrest. It also says that he did not receive a report from the time that the violence broke out to the time it was brought under control, which seems to be different because the intelligence report you refer to, you say aspects thereof was brought under the minister's attention, but here he says up until the time the unrest was brought under control, the minister did not receive any intelligence report from you or the Divisional Commissioner Crime Intelligence. Can you respond to that, please?
Chair, I have explained to say the type of an intelligence report that was generated during the execution. It's a tactical intelligence report that feeds the bigger report that we escalate firstly to the cluster where the minister, my minister, is the co-chair of the cluster, and where I'm also co-chairing the cluster.
That's Police Minister General Police Commissioner General Sitole's testimony at the Human Rights Commission hearings in KZN this week. What does his evidence reveal to us as the public about the state of the country's security cluster and its ability to provide security to you and I? Let's unpack this. I'm joined tonight by security experts David Afrika and Rory Stey. A very good evening to you both. Rory, broad strokes, were you at all surprised to hear just how fractured the relationship is between Cabinet and both the National Commissioner and the KZN Commissioner this week?
Good evening, Timbagile. Good evening, David, and to everybody else listening and watching. Sadly, I wasn't. This has been an ongoing, it's been a problem for a while. And clearly, if there's that kind of fractious relationship right at the top of the police service between the minister, the political head, and the commissioner, the head of the department of the police, we have a very serious problem. It pains me to say that, but I think those are the facts.
Let me come to you then, David Afrika. Minister Begitsele, when he got his turn to speak to the Human Rights Commission about what happened in Gauteng and KZN in July, said that when he went to visit some of the areas, the police commissioner, Sitole, was essentially MIA. Sitole, in his response, says people who knew where to look found him, implying that basically the police minister didn't know what he was doing as far as trying to locate him. But surely both versions can't be true?
Hey, good evening, Timothy, and to the viewers as well. Well, I think, instead of us trying to figure out which version is true, because at least one of it couldn't be, there are more deeper, I would say, issues than just the relationship between the minister and the commissioner, as serious, obviously, as that apparent breakdown is. But I think, it points to a much larger strategic issue we have, which is, on the one hand, a sort of strategic dissipation, that there's no cohesion at the national level of government. And by that I mean even between the president and the ministers and amongst the ministers. You will recall at the time that there was a war of words between various ministers and the president. And that has obviously filtered down to relationships between ministers and the civil servants, in this case the national commissioner, and between, national and provincial commissioners and so on. So to me, the issue is much larger than a sort of personality clash between a minister and a commissioner. It is actually the absence of strategic cohesion right at the top of government, which is very disconcerting.
And how much then does that put you and I and everyone watching tonight at risk as a citizenry that depends on these commissioners, these ministers, to keep us safe? David?
Well, it puts us at grave risk, because the primary responsibility of the political leadership of the country is, on the one hand, to secure the sovereignty of the republic, and on the other hand, to secure the citizenry. I mean, this is very elementary, and this is, in the first instance, why people are elected to become the leaders of the country. And quite clearly, the system that we have and the people that's populating the system is unable to provide either of those two things. I mean, July is just one example of many. We've just had recently the release of the crime stats. I mean, it goes well beyond what happened in July. But as citizens, we are at risk.
And Rory, Sitole, the police commissioner, said in his appearance before the Human Rights Commission that the police minister, there was an early warning report, that's what it's called, but that was not given to the police minister because it was a routine report. In hindsight, when you look at the scale of the devastation caused by the looting, the violence. I mean, over 300 people who died in a matter of days in Gauteng and KZN. How is it acceptable that the minister was not given every bit of information necessary to deal with that crisis?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I think what we're seeing, just to add to what David was saying a few minutes ago, I think what we're seeing here is the police's underperformance during the start of that looting and rioting, call it whatever you want to, was so inadequate that now there is an obvious need to cover one's backside and to start the finger pointing. So this matter of whether or not an intelligence report was passed on to the police commissioner by the minister, or whether the minister saw it or didn't see it or even received it, becomes it smacks of people, trying to cover their own bases now after the fact. And the sad part about all of that, Tembegile, is that we as the citizens, those people whose responsibility it is of the police service to protect and to serve. If you look at the motto of the police service, to protect and to serve, that is just not happening, and we are being failed far too often. You know, we often talk about the cliched pockets of excellence, and there are still many fine men and women in the South African police service that serve us and do a fantastic job with not much in the way of tools and training and particularly intelligence. I mean, at the end of the day, that which we saw in Gauteng and particularly in KwaZulu-Natal was a failure of police intelligence, of crime intelligence. And it just appears to me that the rot at the top has meant that those pockets of excellence are becoming smaller and further and fewer and far between, which is a tremendous tragedy. I mean, we pay our taxes, and then we have to fork out additional money to private security to do that which our civil servants should be doing to protect us. It's an extremely serious state of affairs given the high levels of crime and in particular violent crime in the country.
Rory, David, stand by for me. I want us to talk about in a moment really, talk about the quality of the intelligence that was relied on as the South African Police Service and the broader security cluster responded to what was unfolding in KZN and Gauteng in July. I'm joined by David Afrika and Rory Stey, who are security experts today, as we reflect on the evidence, the appearances by Police Minister Begicele, former Defence Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, the National Police Commissioner Sitole, and KZN's Provincial Commissioner of Police, that's Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who've all contradicted each other about what was going on behind the scenes as they responded to the disaster. Stay with us here on In Focus. Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. I'm Tembekile Mkhototo in for Thabo Mdluli. We're focusing on the appearances by members of the security cluster and the police commissioners, National Police Commissioner Sitole and KZN's Provincial Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission's hearings into the unrest that left more than 300 people dead in Gauteng and KZN. That was in July. Many businesses have still not recovered from the looting and other criminality that characterized that period in South African history. My guests tonight are security experts David Afrika and Rory Stey. Let's bring them back up. And David, we're talking about the quality of intelligence that was relied upon, right? One of the things that came out during these hearings is that the country in July, when all of the unrest was unfolding, needed 12,000 boots on the ground. Well, not essentially boots on the ground, but police officers who were dedicated to dealing with what was going on. We only had 5,000. How do you even arrive at such a terrible miscalculation if you are on top of things as a security cluster?
You know, Tembekile, the one significant value of intelligence, good intelligence, is that when you have good intelligence, you require fewer other resources to deal with a problem because your approach to the problem can be very particular and it can be very focused. So, and obviously you should ideally be able to act in advance of something running out of control. Now, once something has kicked off and you have not had the quality intelligence to prevent something from getting going and developing a momentum, you will find that the numbers of people you need to respond increase, and it increases exponentially the longer you take to respond. And this is one of the problems that we have, one of the consequences actually of poor intelligence. Now, as we sit here, we don't know, I mean, as ordinary citizens, what intelligence was provided. But it seems to me that one cannot claim good intelligence was provided in the light of the response that we saw. I mean, quite clearly there was a deficiency either in the quality of the intelligence produced, or that intelligence was not delivered to the right people at the right time. And I mean, we you know, generally speaking, from other crises and dilemmas we've faced over the last few years, we know that there is a great sort of disorganization and a lack of quality in the intelligence services, and which obviously you know, needs to be addressed and has not so far been seriously addressed by anyone.
So this week then, subsequent to Commissioner Sitole's appearance, Rory, we had the Provincial Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, have his turn to give his version of events. And the headline that emerged from that is him calling the former Defense Minister, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, a liar, because she told the inquiry that Mkhwanazi was nowhere to be found. He'd gone on leave because his wife was having a baby. He says the dates for his paternity leave aren't as was described by the police minister. Did the crisis escalate because the leadership was dealing with crisis or battles of personality?
Well, I think it would be tough for me to say that that was the only reason. What is clear, Tembekile, is that first of all, I have to agree with what David was saying, because the lack of proper intelligence, not just crime intelligence. Remember, we've got military intelligence, we've got crime intelligence, and we have the National Intelligence Agency, all of which are internal. That means their work is to produce intelligence as to what's going on inside the country. But let's talk about crime intelligence, because that's the police intelligence function that should have informed what was going to unfold. So I'm trying to say that the fractured nature of the leadership almost made it impossible for that intelligence, as David put it, to be targeted, because he is absolutely on the money. If you have very specific and targeted intelligence as to what's going to happen, it's much easier to deal with the problem because you're prepared. And you're prepared as to who, when, and where, all of those critical questions. So as I have to say it again, what we're seeing now is we're seeing all of this finger pointing. And as soon as the finger pointing and the accusations and the denials start, that just tells us two things. It tells us that there's a lack of uniformity and solidarity at the top where it should be, and it tells us as South African citizens that we're not very well protected. And those are two very serious problems.
So Mkhwanazi still, in his allegation that the former Defense Minister, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, is a liar, says their relationship essentially reached crumbling point when he confronted her during these many crisis conversations, because according to his version, she'd gone on the record and stated publicly that 800 members of the SANDF were on the ground dealing with the crisis. He says that simply wasn't true. Who should have taken leadership, taken control of the situation at that point, Rory?
Well, I would say that the police should have. So possibly Minister Begekele should have stepped in, because at the end of the day, primarily the responsibility for internal security, or let's call it what it is, law and order, is that of the police, not that of the Defence Force. Yes, of course, there's a role for the SANDF to act in a supplementary and in a support capacity to the police, especially where you require things like cordoning or the closing off of particular areas. But ultimately, it is the police that are responsible for that kind of crime. When stores are looted and windows are smashed and things are set alight, that's not the function of the Defence Force. That's the function of the police. And what I was saying earlier about the finger pointing, I think is evidence of that, because now because where were the police those first 2-3 days? Where were they? Why were they so poorly prepared? And there's all kinds of, I hesitate to call them conspiracy theories, because there may be some truth in the fact that it was that well orchestrated that even senior people within the police and the military were at least party to, if not actually perpetrating those acts. These commissions of inquiries and those that follow will, I suppose, reveal that. But there is, I think, some credence to the fact that the slowness of the police response may have also have been orchestrated and part of the plan.
David, Police Minister Sitole survived the initial reshuffle that followed the unrest in July. The president was under intense pressure to act at some level in cabinet. Ayanda Hlodro, who was then the state security minister responsible for intelligence, was taken to another department. Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula moved from defense to now the role of Speaker of the National Assembly. Sitole was kept in his role. Can he survive now that we are learning more about what's said to have happened behind the scenes? Can the president afford to keep him as police minister?
Thembekile, I don't want to comment on whether the minister should retain his position. He obviously serves at the pleasure of the president. What I would say is that we have a problem that goes beyond the minister as an individual and the ministry. And the problem we have, on the one hand, as I said earlier, is that there is no strategic cohesion. So if you replace this minister with another minister, you will find that minister fighting with whoever else is the Minister of Defense and with his or her commissioner and with the president. And one of the reasons why we don't have the strategic cohesion is because we don't even have a national security strategy. I mean, how can you have cohesion amongst ministers without a proper national security strategy and proper capabilities to sort of give effect to that strategy? So it's not even, I think that one of our problems is that we personalize these things. We think that the problem is often encapsulated in a personality. And on the flip side, we imagine that the solution is contained in a personality.
So, but if the solution is not, pardon me, David, is not to do with, as you say, the removal of a particular minister or ministers, how quickly can the turnaround happen, and who needs to lead that? Is it the president?
I would say that the president is at the apex of political power and the strategic direction of the country, and a national security strategy, which is really where it should start, lies in the hands of the president. And the president should apparently there is a draft strategy. We've obviously not had sight of it as the public. But, this is really where it should start, because the problem also is not a police problem. It is a national security problem. The president himself labeled the thing, I don't know if he's right or not, but he labeled it an insurrection, which is not a policing problem. It is a high-level political problem. And so you cannot solve it by moving around commissioners. I'm not saying they deserve their jobs. I'm saying that it won't solve the problem.
Rory, what will solve the problem, in your view?
Well, I've long been banging this drum, sadly, Thembekile, but I think, and I will continue to say, that the malaise that we're seeing within the police service, and there could be many reasons, but two of those that are so glaringly obvious are it's a lack of proper management. So, in other words, it starts at the top. I don't think that our officers on the ground, those boots on the ground, that thin blue line that really does stand in the gap for all of us, are being supported sufficiently from their commanders. And as we've been discussing all night, the other problem, other than a lack of effective management and command and control and supervision, is that of proper intelligence. So what should be happening, for example, is that if crime intelligence were on top of what criminal tactics are, that should immediately inform the training division, and that should filter down into whatever training the police are receiving. So I think that management, training, and intelligence, and the combination of that, the nexus of that, how it meets and how they all intersect, is the problem. I ask the question, are our intelligence services informing our police training division? Are they taking the tactics of the criminals, figuring out with the trainers how we counteract those? And is it being trained on the ground where that constable and that sergeant who put on their body armor and take their weapons out every day and get out onto the streets, face the criminal at the coalface?
Rory,
that is my problem.
Thank you very much for that. We are out of time. Rory Stey and David Afrika are security experts speaking to us about the evidence that we've heard so far from the Police Minister, Cele, his Commissioner, Sitole, the former Defence Minister, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, and the KZN Police Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. By the way, in response to his evidence, the Human Rights Commission has said that the former Defence Minister, who's now Speaker of the National Assembly, could be called back to respond to Mkhwanazi's claim that she is a liar based on what she said about him and what he says were conversations he had with her about deployments during